Hello and thank you for joining us on World Now. We're starting off with our special coverage of the 50th anniversary of the Economic Community of West African States.
This celebration would not only be a moment of rejoicing, but also a moment of reflection and introspection.
As the world navigates an era of increasing centers of power and growing tensions between major global powers, West Africa, through its regional organization, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, stands at the threshold of defining the region's international relations agenda. Exactly 50 years ago, on the 28th of May 1975, 15 West African countries agreed to establish the Economic Community of West African States. The profound work and call for unity came through by both the Togolese president, Gnassingbé Eyadema, and the Nigerian former leader, Yakubu Gowon, and the union came into effect in West Africa. Both traversed the region, leading to the signing of the ECOWAS Treaty in 1975 in Lagos by 15 nations. The Lagos Treaty was meant to enable the free movement of goods and people within the region. In 1990, they abolished the use of personal identification cards while moving across the border. Despite all its achievements, the journey has not been smooth. In response, the bloc outlined transitional guidelines maintaining policies like free trade and visa-free movement, at least temporarily. Today, leaders of ECOWAS are gathering to celebrate 50 years since its formation and are expected to address regional security challenges as the continent also seeks answers in the face of U.S. trade tariffs and aid cuts. President Bola Tinubu is leading Nigeria's leg of the Golden Jubilee celebration, which was officially flagged off back in April in Accra, Ghana. 13 presidents and heads of state are expected to grace this event. Now let's bring in our correspondent Femi Akonde, who has been monitoring development at the celebration. Femi, what's the latest with the 50th anniversary celebration of ECOWAS?
Well, the main anniversary is underway as we speak at the hall behind me in the Eco Hotel Convention Center. What happened earlier before now was a reenactment of the treaty signed in 1975. The leaders of ECOWAS returned to that same place where that treaty was signed in 1965, the Nigerian Institute for International Affairs at the Kofo Abayomi axis of Victoria Island. And they also had the honor of being joined by General Yakubu Gowon, who's the last of the founding fathers of ECOWAS. You know, he was there with them. He shared his experience. He shared nostalgic feelings of how, you know, it all went down in 1995 when 15 countries came together to form the regional bloc, which is the Economic Community of West African States. And 50 years down the line, some people have said that, well, the bloc has become stronger because they have been able to promote integration, promote cooperation, ease trade between the countries. But, you know, there are still some gray areas, especially along the line the region became known as the coup belt or the hot belt for military coups and takeovers, not just in Africa, but in the world. And that has also led to, you know, ECOWAS wielding the big stick, imposing sanctions on some of its member countries where these undemocratic takeover of government has taken place, with the latest being Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. This has also, you know, forced these three countries to pull out of the regional bloc. So right now, the ranks of ECOWAS have been depleted from 15 to about 12. ECOWAS is still in talks with these countries, trying to bring them back to the fold. And with these events ongoing, there are also representatives from these three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. What President Bola Tinubu tried to do as the chairman of the ECOWAS heads of government is also to ensure that, these talks are ongoing, the door is open to negotiation and ensure that, and persuasion to see that along the line these people or these military juntas in these countries are maybe persuaded to transit into democracy or just provide a timeline for a democratic transition. And then maybe ECOWAS may also begin to consider other ways of ensuring that they return to the fold. So what is also happening here, we have seen documentaries of former heads of states, people who have also served as heads of ECOWAS governments, heads of ECOWAS government, give their view about how the regional bloc has developed, has evolved over time, what the future holds for the regional bloc, and how these cooperation, trade ties, and integration should be strengthened as, the world evolves. Esther.
A long day it's been, and especially hearing these leaders talk about their hopes for the body. A number of the leaders have spoken about the need for introspection among themselves to ensure that ECOWAS is able to remain a strong, formidable force. But what other activities are we likely to see as this celebration continues?
Well, after this main event going on here, there will also be another lecture at the NIIA. The dignitaries here will return to the NIIA, where a lecture will be delivered by Professor Bolaji Akeyemi. And, we expect the ministers of foreign affairs in the ECOWAS member countries to be there at that event, where they will also, share experiences, come up with solutions to ensure that diplomacy is enhanced in building this regional cooperation and integration among member states, and also building ECOWAS together as a bloc to be able to deal more and interact more with the bigger society, including the African Union. Also, as the African Union moves towards the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, ECOWAS is also ensuring that, they also have a better bargain. They also are more united and ensure that, out of this whole continental cooperation that is expected, ECOWAS is not left out. They get their own fair share from this whole deal that will enhance trade, movements of persons and goods within the continent.
Femi Akonde, thank you very much for that update. Thank you. Well, let's now bring in international affairs analyst Paul Aime, who is also joining us to discuss the significance of the celebration. Paul Aime joins from the UK. Good to have you join us, Mr. Aime. Sometimes it's as though it's during coups that we really get to hear about ECOWAS. Talk to us about the founding objectives of the bloc, and if you think that this 50th anniversary is really worth celebrating.
That's a very big way to start. And then let's say congratulations to ECOWAS and to us, the citizens of the community, about, estimated 400 million. It's not a mean achievement, I can tell you. But like you said, ECOWAS has been, and ECOWAS is guilty of not communicating itself, of not telling its own story, because of all the 8 regional economic communities that you have in Africa. ECOWAS is the one that has blazed the trail, is the one that was working or has been working. And that is the reason people are now judging it by his own standards, saying, why are you dropping the ball? Because it is a question of not measuring up to his own standard that is set in terms of something like peace and security, and then conflict prevention, management, and resolution. ECOWAS was able to to stop wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And it became a template for much of Africa and even the world. And went on. We talked about the free movement of people, where citizens of one country can move to the other and stay up to 90 days without visa. ECOWAS was the one that started it, and others have followed. So ECOWAS has presented some templates that were copied even by the AU. AU, is a successor of the OAU that started in 2002. So some of the protocols and instruments that they are using were that of which they borrowed from, for instance, the protocol or supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance. These were things that, and the world has been looking up to ECOWAS to do more, because they say that to whom much is given, much is also expected. But unfortunately, in the last 10 to 15 years, ECOWAS, the leaders dropped the ball. So it's a question of leadership that has come to, become a big challenge. And that is why over time, you now find leaders that were trying to perpetuate themselves in power, tenure elongation, third-term syndrome, and then you find leaders carrying out what you call civilian coups, that like tampering with the constitution of their countries, institutional coups, and then rigging election, and not delivering. They are no longer delivering on those things that the founding fathers have set out to do. So that is where the problem has been. That has caused that those civilian coups now have, translated to military coups. That you have 4 of the countries today, of the 15, now under military dictatorship. But that is not to say, because remember that until 2020, when the coup happened in Mali, all the 15 were actually, running one form of democracy or the other. It may be imperfect, but they were all democracy. But now that this bug of leaders that they are corrupt, they are no longer, they are violating human rights, they are violating their national constitutions, and then repressing opposition and wanting to remain in power. That's it tight kind of. That is what the problem that ECOWAS has. But otherwise, it has achieved a lot in terms of, I mentioned, free movement. In terms of agriculture, there is a policy on agriculture, there's policy, there's a trade liberalization scheme that it has. ECOWAS has, something on energy, sustainable energy. It has something on infrastructure. For instance, the road from Dakar to Praia, that is about more than 3,000 kilometers. Covering almost all the 15 states. Yes, Mr. So the point is, to the point that some countries, Mauritania, for instance, that left, before I used to be 16, Mauritania left in 2000, but Mauritania wanted to come back. And other countries like Morocco wanted to join ECOWAS. So it means that he was doing something until this race started beating the organization because of paucity of leadership. Yeah, and that issue of paucity of leadership has been a strong concern, that many have really spoken about, because we've seen these coups that you've mentioned, see countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic exit the regional bloc. So I'm curious as to what you think ECOWAS must, as a body, do now. What practical steps can be taken to ensure that it's able to hold its own and forge ahead with unity and work towards expansion? It has to look at those things, the best practices, those things that worked for it in the past. For instance, these are not new. This coup is not new to ECOWAS, but they have been able to manage it in the past. But suddenly, this fall came, and particularly that of Niger, that was badly managed to the point that ECOWAS was now trying to use force to go and invade his own member. I mean, it was unheard of. And that was why, because it was unpopular, and that is what has given emboldened some of these military leaders. But that is not to say that military dictatorship is anything, is the answer. Military regime is an aberration. You know, the world does not have appetite for it. But how do you hold his, how will ECOWAS hold his own, like you said? It is by obeying his own rules. It is by the leaders, particularly, playing by the rule. Stop, you know, tinkering with the Constitution. Stop carrying out constitutional coups, civilian coups. Stop and govern. Let the citizens, the 400 million citizens, feel the impact of ECOWAS. ECOWAS is governed, they have what they call is, for instance, in the 1993 revised treaty, they introduced this community levy. Instead of making contributions, the levy was deducted from source, from the exports tax that was goods coming into ECOWAS. So they didn't feel it. And that is where, for instance, a country like Nigeria was paying, because of its size and the economy, has continued to contribute up to 60% of ECOWAS's budget. So these are the visionary measures and dynamic that the leaders have. That somebody like General Gowon and his colleagues, we have to pay tribute to them. The modern crop of leaders should please go back to those, the instruments are there, what they can use to be able to make sure that they govern, give a good leadership, stop, corruption, and make sure that the concern is about the ordinary citizens, not about themselves, not about the political class, not about leaders, because it's now seen as if it's ECOWAS of state or ECOWAS of heads of state. No, it should be ECOWAS of people, and people matter. The 400 million people should be at the center of whatever policies that ECOWAS will drive. That would mean that no individual, no matter how competent, how skilled, how, whatever you are, you cannot be more than your nation. And so it has to start from the nation. Give that leadership from the national level before you now take it up to regional level. And then here, the responsibility is also on Nigeria. You know, in any organization, there's always somebody who is, you call a hegemon or superpower, like you have NATO. You know that US was playing a major role. In here, Nigeria also has to step up. Nigeria has to show leadership. The rest of Africa are waiting for Nigeria. Africa cannot move unless Nigeria gets it right. Mandela and Nelson Mandela and other people, they have said so. So Nigeria has this as a responsibility, as a duty to make sure that it gets it right, so that can translate into regional leadership, continental, and then at the world level.
International Affairs Analyst Paul Aime, thank you very much for speaking so greatly about ECOWAS on World Now. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. God bless you.
This celebration would not only be a moment of rejoicing, but also a moment of reflection and introspection.